Story 1. The Never-Ending House. A Nightmare Inside the Winchester Mansion. My name is Daniel Carter, and I'm an independent journalist who investigates haunted places. I've explored some of the most terrifying locations in the world, but nothing could have prepared me for what I encountered at the Winchester Mystery House. There's something undeniably strange about that house. Staircases leading to nowhere, doors that open into walls, windows inside rooms where they shouldn't be, and an eerie silence that never fades. They say Sarah Winchester built this mansion to confuse the ghosts of those killed by her family's firearms, hoping they would never find her. At first, I didn't believe in the legends, but after what I experienced, I will never step foot inside that place again. One night, I was invited to a private tour, a rare opportunity for only a few select individuals who truly believe in the paranormal. My guide, Ellen, a senior staff member of the museum, told me, "Tonight, we're going where no regular visitors are allowed." She handed me a flashlight and led me toward the basement, a place even most staff members avoid after dark. As soon as we descended, the air turned cold and heavy, like stepping into a place untouched by time. I felt watched, though no one was there. "This used to be the workers' quarters," Ellen explained. "Many of them died mysteriously while constructing the house, and some never left." Suddenly, I felt a cold breath against my ear, like someone whispering, but there was no sound. I spun around and shined my flashlight, only dust and wooden beams. But then, I saw them. Handprints. Fresh, damp handprints on the old, untouched walls, appearing right in front of me as if someone invisible had just pressed their palms against them. We moved deeper into the house, reaching a bizarre spiral staircase that led straight up into the ceiling with no exit. "Sarah designed these to confuse the spirits," Ellen said. "She thought if she could trap them in an endless maze, they would never reach her." I placed my hand on the wooden railing, and suddenly, I felt another hand, ice-cold and sticky, grip mine. I yanked my hand away, my breath caught in my throat. There was no one there, but the feeling of those thin, bony fingers lingered on my skin. Ellen glanced at me. "It's starting," she whispered. We walked down a narrow hallway, barely wide enough for two people. That's when I heard it. Heavy footsteps behind us. Someone was following us. I turned my flashlight toward the noise. A shadow darted across the corridor, fast, but not human. A door creaked open at the end of the hallway, its hinges groaning like something had just stepped inside. Ellen grabbed my arm. "Don't go in there," she warned. But before I could react, I felt an invisible force pull me inside. The room was nearly empty, except for a single rocking chair, slowly moving back and forth, as if someone had just stood up from it. Then I heard it. A whisper. Not in my ears, but inside my head. A voice, female, low and broken, murmuring in a language I didn't understand. I tried to move, but my body felt frozen. An unseen weight pressed down on my shoulders, as if something was behind me, breathing against my neck. And then, I saw it. There was an old mirror in the corner of the room. My reflection was there, but I wasn't alone. A woman stood behind me, pale face, hollow black eyes, dressed in Victorian mourning clothes. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. Then the reflection smiled, but I wasn't smiling. Before I could scream, the door slammed shut, and the air turned suffocating. The whispers grew louder, echoing inside my skull. I yanked at the door handle, locked. The rocking chair stopped moving. Then, a loud bang against the wall. Then another. The whole room shook. Finally, the door burst open, and Ellen pulled me out. We ran through the twisting hallways, the sounds of pounding footsteps behind us. Just as we reached the exit, a deep, guttural voice growled from the darkness, a voice that didn't belong to anything human. Then, silence. I stepped outside and turned off my flashlight, my hands still shaking. But just as I glanced back at the house, I saw it. The same woman, standing at an upstairs window, watching me. She didn't move. She didn't blink. She just stared. Ellen turned to me and said something I will never forget. "You're lucky. The house didn't keep you." I don't know what she meant, but I do know one thing. The Winchester Mystery House is not just a strange mansion. It's a labyrinth, a prison for things beyond our understanding. And those who try to uncover its secrets may never leave. When we reached a small convenience store off the side of the highway, I decided to pull over and see if the sedan would do the same. The gravel parking lot was nearly empty. As I slowed to turn in, I watched the sedan pass by on the highway. It didn't stop, didn't even brake. I exhaled a shaky breath, figuring that was the end of it. Maybe it was just a coincidence. The kids and I ran inside for a quick restroom break and some drinks. Everything felt normal again. I chatted briefly with the clerk about the weather and the local farmland. No mention of a suspicious driver. We hopped back in the truck, and I felt more at ease. Back on the road, about 20 minutes later, I noticed a car in my rearview mirror again. It was far back, so I couldn't tell if it was the same maroon sedan. Still, I kept glancing every few seconds, trying to confirm. With the sun hitting my mirror, it was almost impossible to be sure, but the shape of the headlights looked eerily similar. I kept driving, my heart thumping a little faster. At one point, we hit a bend in the road with a slight incline, and I lost sight of the car entirely. When we came out the other side, it was gone, just gone. Part of me was relieved, another part was unsettled. How did it vanish so quickly? Did it turn off onto a side road or just pull over somewhere? A few miles later, the kids started complaining that they were hungry. I was too. There was a rest area about 5 minutes up the highway, one I've used in the past. I signaled and took the exit, half expecting the maroon sedan to appear in my mirror again. But it never did. The rest stop was practically empty except for one semi-truck parked at the far end. I parked close to the rest building, making sure to stay near plenty of light. We got out, stretched our legs, and scanned the area. No sign of that car, no sign of any car that resembled it. My head was on a swivel, though, and I couldn't shake the feeling I was being watched. We used the facilities, grabbed some vending machine snacks, and sat at a picnic table for a few minutes. Another driver, an older woman, walked by with her dog and gave us a polite nod but didn't say much. I started feeling a little silly, like maybe I'd blown the situation out of proportion. So, we loaded back into the truck, ready to finish our trip to the farmhouse. I kept checking my mirrors as we merged back onto the highway. Nothing strange, just normal vehicles, random semis, the usual. The rest of the drive was smooth. When we finally pulled onto the dirt road that led to our old farmhouse, the kids cheered. The sun was setting, and that warm glow settled over the fields. The tension I'd been feeling began to melt away. Story 2, Whispers of the Bell Witch. My name is Ethan Walker, and I never believed in ghosts, curses, or the supernatural, until I spent a night near the Bell family's old land in Adams, Tennessee. I was a history major back in college, fascinated by folklore and legends. The Bell Witch was always one of those stories I dismissed as an exaggerated myth. That was before I saw her, before I heard her voice in the darkness. In October of 2019, I traveled to Adams, a quiet town that still carried the weight of the past. My goal was simple: document the legend of the Bell Witch for an online project. I planned to interview locals, visit the historical sites, and, if I was lucky, spend a night near the land where the Bell family's torment began. According to legend, in the early 1800s, John Bell and his family were haunted by a powerful spirit, one that spoke, moved objects, and even physically attacked them. The entity, known as Kate, claimed to be the spirit of Kate Batts, a woman who had cursed the Bell family before her death. Some said it was a vengeful ghost. Others believed it was something darker, something demonic. I didn't believe either. Not yet. That first evening, I met with a local historian, Mr. Grayson, an elderly man who had lived in Adams his entire life. He agreed to tell me the true story, at least his version of it. As we sat on his porch, the sun dipping below the horizon, he lit a pipe and stared into the distance. "You think this is just a story, don't you?" he asked. I nodded. "I think something happened, but over time, people exaggerated it." He chuckled softly, shaking his head. "That's what most folks believe, until they hear her." I frowned. "Hear her?" Mr. Grayson leaned in, his voice barely above a whisper. "The Bell Witch never left, son. She still talks to those who listen. You spend the night out there, and you'll understand." I wasn't sure whether he was serious or trying to scare me, but something about his tone unsettled me. Later that night, I decided to do what no one had done in years: camp near the old Bell property. I set up my tent a short distance from the Bell Witch Cave, a place where, according to legend, the entity still lingers. My equipment included a camera, a digital recorder, and a flashlight, just enough to document the night. The woods were eerily silent. No crickets, no rustling leaves, just an unnatural stillness. It felt as if something was waiting. At 12:03 a.m., my recorder picked up whispering. I didn't hear it at first, but when I played back the audio, there it was, a low, raspy voice murmuring my name. I felt a chill creep up my spine. I hadn't told anyone I'd be here tonight. How did it know my name? The wind picked up, carrying with it a rotten sulfuric smell. I turned on my flashlight, scanning the trees. That's when I saw it. A shadowy figure standing between the trees, watching me. My breath caught. It wasn't moving, just standing there, silent, its form barely visible against the darkness. Then, it spoke. "You don't belong here." The voice was hoarse, distant, yet somehow right in my ear. I spun around, but no one was behind me. The shadow was gone. I grabbed my camera, heart a-pounding, and tried to take a picture. But my battery, which had been fully charged, was suddenly dead. A deep, guttural laugh echoed through the trees, mocking. Then, the footsteps began. They circled my tent, slow, deliberate. Something was walking around me, unseen, yet its presence was suffocating. I tried to reason with myself. Maybe an animal? Maybe my mind was playing tricks. But then, something unseen grabbed my wrist. It was ice cold, bony fingers pressing into my skin, pulling me toward the darkness. I yanked away and ran. The path back to my car felt endless. The sound of whispered laughter followed me, growing louder, as if she was right behind me, breathing against my neck. As I reached my car, I saw movement in the rearview mirror. A woman's face, pale, hollow eyes, a twisted grin. I floored the gas, not stopping until I reached the nearest gas station, where I sat in my car, shaking, unable to process what had just happened. The next morning, I checked my wrist. There were finger-shaped bruises, proof that something had touched me. I left Tennessee that day, but the nightmares never stopped. Every now and then I wake up in the middle of the night and hear a voice in my ear. You don't belong here. And sometimes I hear her laughing. Story 3. The most haunted hotel in America. I never believed in ghosts. Not really. But after spending a night at the Stanley Hotel, I can't explain what happened to me. My name is James Holloway, and in the winter of 2018, I traveled to Estes Park, Colorado, to write an article on the most haunted hotel in America. The Stanley Hotel, famous for inspiring The Shining, had long been rumored to be a place where spirits never checked out. I booked room 217, the most infamous room in the hotel. Legend says that in 1911, a chambermaid named Elizabeth Wilson was nearly killed when a gas explosion destroyed part of the room. She survived, but ever since, guests have reported strange occurrences. Lights turning on and off, luggage being mysteriously unpacked, and even ghostly figures appearing at the foot of their beds. I wanted to experience it for myself. The moment I stepped into the grand lobby, a strange feeling settled over me. The hotel was beautiful, yet there was something off. The chandeliers flickered slightly, as if the building itself was breathing. The woman at the front desk gave me a knowing smile when I checked in. "Room 217?" she asked, tilting her head. I nodded. She slid the key across the counter. "If anything happens, don't panic." I laughed. "So do the ghosts here actually show up?" Her smile faded. "They do, when they want to." I tried to shake off the unease as I took the old-fashioned elevator to the second floor. The hallway was long, dimly lit, and eerily silent. Even with the thick carpet, I swear I could hear footsteps behind me. I reached room 217 and hesitated before unlocking the door. The room was surprisingly normal. A large bed, an antique dresser, and a window overlooking the snowy mountains. But the air inside felt heavy. I set my bag down and tested my digital recorder, hoping to capture any unusual sounds overnight. The plan was simple: stay awake, document any strange activity, and love in the morning with nothing but a spooky story to tell. I was so wrong. At 11:45 p.m., I started to feel watched. The temperature in the room dropped suddenly. One moment warm, the next freezing cold. Then the bathroom light turned on by itself. I grabbed my camera, but as soon as I lifted it, the light switched off again. Goosebumps crawled up my arms. "Hello?" I called out. No response. At 12:30 a.m., I heard it. A soft, distant humming. It was a woman's voice, faint, but right outside my door. I slowly approached, pressing my ear against the wood. The humming stopped. Then, 3 loud knocks. I flinched, stepping back. I grabbed my phone and started recording, my heart pounding. Then came the worst part. The door handle rattled. Someone, or something, was trying to get in. I took a deep breath and yanked the door open. The hallway was empty, but the air smelled like lilac and old perfume. I quickly shut the door, locking it this time. I told myself it was just my imagination, until I turned back to my bed. My suitcase, which I had zipped shut, was wide open. My clothes were neatly folded on the dresser. I hadn't touched them. A cold chill ran through my body. I sat down, breathing heavily. "Okay," I muttered, trying to convince myself it was nothing. But then I saw it. The imprint of a body on the bed, right beside me. It was as if someone invisible had just been lying there. I bolted off the mattress, knocking over my recorder. Then I heard a voice, not out loud. Inside my head, a woman's whisper, "You should go." The air turned ice cold. I grabbed my keys, threw my bag over my shoulder, and ran out of room 217. As I reached the elevator, I glanced back down the hallway, and that's when I saw her. A woman in an old-fashioned maid's uniform, standing at the end of the corridor, her face pale as the moonlight. She didn't move. She didn't blink. She just watched me. I jabbed the elevator button frantically, my pulse hammering in my ears. Just before the doors shut, I saw something that still haunts me. She smiled, but not a friendly smile. It was a knowing smile, as if she knew I'd be back. I checked out at 4 a.m. When I told the woman at the front desk what had happened, she just sighed. "Elizabeth was always a good hostess," she said. "She just doesn't like it when men sleep alone in that room." I never told anyone what really happened that night, because even now, in the dead of night, I sometimes wake up to a faint humming and the smell of lilac perfume. Story 4, The Island of the Dolls, a night I'll never forget. I never believed in ghosts, not really. But after what happened on that island, I don't think I'll ever sleep the same again. My name is Daniel Reyes, and I grew up hearing the legends of Isla de las Muñecas, the Island of the Dolls, just outside Mexico City, in the canals of Xochimilco. My grandmother used to tell me stories about it, how it was cursed, how the dolls whispered at night, their dead eyes watching anyone who dared to set foot there. I always thought it was just a scary bedtime story, until I went there myself. In 2019, I was working as a journalist for a travel blog, covering haunted locations in Mexico. My friend Mateo, a local guide, agreed to take me there at night, something that most people refuse to do. The island had become a creepy tourist attraction during the day, but at night, it was a different place entirely. We took a small boat from the mainland, drifting through the dark, narrow waterways of Xochimilco. The air was thick, humid, and completely silent. Not a single sound of frogs or birds, just the occasional splash of water against the boat. The closer we got to the island, the heavier the air felt. And then, through the mist, we saw them. Hundreds of dolls, hanging from trees, nailed to wooden posts, their limbs tangled in vines, their plastic faces rotting and cracked. Some had missing eyes, others had grimy, matted hair. They swung gently in the breeze, as if watching us approach. Mateo refused to step onto the island. "I'll wait here," he muttered. "I don't go there at night." I laughed nervously, thinking he was joking, but his face was serious. "You think it's a legend," he said. "You won't in the morning." I grabbed my flashlight and stepped onto the wooden dock. The moment my foot touched the island, a wave of unease washed over me. It was as if the air was thicker, heavier. I walked deeper into the island, my flashlight beam bouncing off countless doll faces. Some were missing heads, their bodies still hanging like lifeless children in the trees. Then I saw the hut, the small wooden shack where Don Julian Santana, the island's caretaker, had lived before his death. He was the one who started it all. Legend says he found a little girl's body floating in the water decades ago, drowned. Soon after, he found a doll drifting nearby, and believing it to be a sign, he hung it in a tree to honor her spirit. But one doll wasn't enough. He became obsessed. For 50 years, he collected and hung hundreds of dolls across the island, believing they kept the girl's spirit at peace. Then, in 2001, Don Julian himself was found dead in the same canal where the girl drowned. Some say the island took him. I stepped into his hut, the floorboards creaking beneath my feet. It was filled with old photographs, broken doll parts, and candles melted into strange shapes. Then my flashlight flickered and went out. I smacked it, trying to get it back on. That's when I heard it. A small, childlike giggle. My breath caught in my throat. It came from behind me. I spun around, scanning the dark, but there was nothing there. Then, a rustling sound. The dolls were moving. They swayed gently, their plastic limbs brushing against each other. But there was no wind. The air was still. I told myself it was just my imagination. But then I saw it. A doll on the ground, its head slowly turned toward me. I stumbled back, my pulse pounding in my ears. Dolls don't move on their own. Then from the darkness of the trees, I heard it. A whisper. "Ayúdame. Help me." I turned and ran. I sprinted through the trees, branches clawing at my clothes, my flashlight swinging wildly in my grip. I could hear the dolls whispering, their voices rising in the wind. Or was it laughter? The dock was just ahead. I could see Mateo waiting in the boat, his face pale. I jumped in, nearly tipping us over. "Go now," I shouted. He didn't hesitate. He paddled hard, the boat cutting through the dark water as we left the island behind. But as we drifted away, I looked back one last time, and I saw her. A little girl standing among the trees, barely visible in the moonlight. Her dress was torn and wet, her dark hair hanging over her face. But the worst part, she was holding a doll, and she was smiling. I never went back. Some nights I wake up to the sound of small footsteps outside my window. Sometimes I swear I hear a voice. "Ayúdame?" I lock my doors. I try to tell myself it's just a dream. But when I wake up in the morning, there's always a doll sitting on my nightstand. And I don't own any dolls. Story 5, the Dyatlov Pass. Incident, what I saw that night. My name is Alexei Petrov, and for the past 30 years, I have never spoken about what happened in the Ural Mountains in 1959. But now as I sit here, knowing my time is running out, I need to tell the truth. I was part of a rescue team sent to find the missing hikers from Igor Dyatlov's expedition. 9 experienced mountaineers had vanished in the middle of a snowstorm on Kholat Syakhl, the mountain of the dead. When we found them, nothing made sense. It started in February 1959. A team of skilled hikers from Ural Polytechnic Institute had set off on a journey through the Siberian wilderness. They were young, strong, and well prepared. But something went horribly wrong. After weeks with no contact, a search party, including me, was sent to find them. We reached the Dyatlov campsite on February 26th. The first thing we saw was their tent, half buried in snow, its fabric slashed open from the inside, as if they had cut their way out in a hurry. Their boots, coats, and gear were still inside, but the hikers were gone. Then we started finding the bodies. The first 2 were discovered nearly a mile away, barefoot and dressed only in their underwear, as if they had run into the freezing cold without thinking. Their hands were covered in defensive wounds, and their faces were twisted in terror. It looked as though they had been running from something. Further up the slope, we found 3 more bodies, including Dyatlov himself. Their bodies were covered in deep bruises, and one had a fractured skull, but there were no external wounds to explain the sheer force of the injuries. Then we found the last 4 hikers, buried under 4 meters of snow, and that's when we realized this was no ordinary accident. One of the bodies was missing its tongue, another's eyes were gone, and all 4 of them had strange burns on their skin, like they had been exposed to some powerful radiation. That night, as we set up camp, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. The wind howled through the pass, but beneath it, I swore I could hear whispers. Then, around 2 a.m., something happened. One of the men in our team, Sergei, suddenly bolted upright in his sleeping bag, his eyes wide with terror. "Do you hear that?" he whispered. I strained my ears. At first there was nothing, just the wind. Then a low, humming sound, growing louder, and then we saw it, a glowing orange light hovering over the ridge. It was huge, moving too fast for a flare, too erratic for a star. It pulsed like a living thing. Then just as quickly as it appeared, it vanished, leaving behind a strange metallic smell in the air. We barely slept that night. The next morning we found something that still haunts me. Just beyond our camp, we saw massive footprints in the snow. Not human, not animal, something huge, something that wasn't supposed to be there. We were told never to speak of it. The Soviet military sealed the case, claiming the hikers died due to an avalanche or hypothermia. But I know that's not true. Something unnatural happened on that mountain, and whatever it was, it's still out there, waiting, watching. Story 6, The Unseen Guest, the Hinterkaifeck Murders. I never told anyone what I saw that night. Not the police, not my family, no one. Even now, decades later, I still wake up in a cold sweat, hearing the sound of footsteps in the attic. It was March 31st, 1922, when the Gruber family was murdered on their remote farm in Hinterkaifeck, Germany. 6 people, Andreas Gruber, his wife Cecilia, their daughter Victoria, her 2 children, and their maid, were all brutally slaughtered with a pickaxe. To this day, no one knows who did it. But I think I do, and I wish I didn't. I was 17 years old when it happened. My uncle owned a small shop in Groburn, the nearest village, and sometimes I would deliver goods to the Gruber farm. I never liked going there. Something about that place felt wrong. The farm was isolated, surrounded by endless forests. Even in daylight, the house seemed lifeless, like something was watching from the windows. A week before the murders, Andreas Gruber came into my uncle's shop. He looked pale, like he hadn't slept in days. He leaned in close and whispered, "Someone is living in my house." He told us he had found footprints in the snow, leading from the woods to the house, but not away. He heard footsteps in the attic at night. Doors creaked open on their own. His keys kept disappearing, but when he checked, there was no one there. I laughed it off. Everyone knew Andreas was a strange man, always muttering about the devil. But a few days later, their maid quit without warning, claiming the house was haunted. Then the new maid arrived, and that night, they all died. I was one of the first to arrive after the bodies were discovered. The town had been whispering about the farm all morning. No one had seen the family in days. When we entered the barn, the stench of blood hit me like a wall. There, in the hay, lay 4 bodies, their skulls split open, eyes staring at nothing. The mother and daughter had been beaten so badly their faces were unrecognizable. The little girl, Cecilia Jr., had tufts of her own hair clutched in her hands, as if she had been awake long enough to pull it out in terror. Inside the house, we found the maid and the baby, killed the same way. And yet the strangest thing, the murderer had stayed in the house for days after the killings. The animals had been fed. The fireplace was still warm. Someone had been sleeping in their beds. I turned to leave, and that's when I saw it. A shadow in the attic. It moved. My breath caught in my throat. Everyone else was in the barn. I was alone. Slowly I stepped up the creaking wooden staircase, my heart hammering in my chest. The attic was dark, filled with dust and old furniture. And then I saw them. Footprints. Not fresh, but old, dried in the dust. And they led to a small hole in the wall, just big enough for someone to watch the family below. I felt something behind me. I spun around. Nothing. But the dust on the floor was disturbed, like someone had just been standing there. I ran. They never found who did it. But sometimes I dream of the attic, of the footprints that never led away from the house. And when I wake up, I swear I hear someone breathing in the dark. Story 7, The Last Night at the Cecil Hotel. I had never heard of Elisa Lam before I started working at the Cecil Hotel in Los Angeles. Back then, I was just a night shift security guard, fresh out of college, trying to make ends meet. The place had a bad reputation. Drugs, crime, even murders. But I didn't care. It was just a job. Until February 2013. That's when everything changed. That's when I saw the footage. It was a cold night in late January when Elisa Lam checked in. A 21-year-old student from Canada, traveling alone, staying in one of the cheaper shared rooms on the 5th floor. She seemed normal, shy, quiet. She told the front desk she was excited to explore LA, and she posted updates on her blog like any other tourist. But then, things got weird. After a few nights, her roommates complained. They said she was acting strange, locking herself in the bathroom for hours, whispering at night, writing strange notes on the walls. So we moved her to a private room. That was the last time anyone saw her. February 1st came and she was supposed to check out. But she never did. Her bags were still in her room. Her bed was untouched. She had vanished. The police came, searched the hotel, but found nothing. Then a few days later, the manager asked me to pull the security footage from the hotel elevator. And that's when I saw her last moments. The video started at 2:30 a.m., February 1st. Elisa enters the elevator wearing a red hoodie. She presses the buttons, but the doors don't close. She steps back, waits. Nothing. Then she peeks outside, suddenly alert, like someone is following her. She jumps back in, presses more buttons. Still nothing. Her behavior becomes erratic. She steps out, waves her arms, almost like she's talking to someone who isn't there. Then she disappears from view, and after a full minute, the elevator closes and starts working again. I replayed that footage 100 times. What was she seeing? Or worse, what was seeing her? February 19th, the guests started complaining about the water. It was dark, smelled awful. Maintenance went to check the rooftop water tanks. That's where they found her. Elisa Lam's body, floating face up. She had been there for weeks. The police ruled it an accidental drowning. But nothing made sense. The hotel's rooftop was locked. The only way up was through a door with an alarm. But it was never triggered. And the water tank? It was huge, heavy, with no ladder. Even I couldn't climb in alone. So how did she get inside? I don't work at the Cecil Hotel anymore, but sometimes I have nightmares. I see the elevator doors refusing to close. I hear whispers in the water, and I swear in the grainy footage, just before Elisa disappears, there's a shadow standing behind her, watching, waiting. Story 8, The Vanishing of the Sodder Children. I never told anyone what I saw that night. It's been decades, but every Christmas Eve I still find myself thinking about that burning house, the 5 missing children, and the mystery that has never truly been solved. I was there in Fayetteville, West Virginia in 1945, when the Sodder family's world was torn apart in the dead of night. Even now, as an old man, I sometimes feel like I've been carrying a secret I don't fully understand. The Sodders were a good family. George and Jenny Sodder had 10 children, and they lived a quiet, comfortable life. George was a hard-working man, originally from Italy, who had built his home with his own hands. People in town respected him, but not everyone liked him. He had strong opinions about Mussolini and wasn't afraid to voice them. Some Italian immigrants in town hated him for it. Then in the days leading up to Christmas, strange things began happening. A few weeks before the fire, a man showed up at their home, claiming to be selling life insurance. When George declined, the man's face darkened, and he said something chilling. "Your house will go up in smoke. Your children will be destroyed." George brushed it off as a bizarre threat, nothing more. But then a stranger appeared, watching the Sodder children from his car as they walked home from school. And just days before Christmas Eve, another man was seen lurking near the Sodder home, staring up at the roof before walking away into the woods. Jenny noticed something too. A telephone repairman told her that their wires had been cut. Not damaged, cut deliberately. But why? And by whom? The answer came on Christmas Eve, but it wasn't an answer anyone wanted. That night, the family celebrated together. The children were excited, playing with the new toys they had received. Jenny tucked them into bed while George stayed up a little longer. At around 12:30 a.m., the phone rang. Jenny answered and heard a strange woman's voice, laughing eerily. "Is Mr. Scter there?" Before Jenny could respond, the line went dead. An hour later, she woke up again. This time, she heard a loud thud on the roof, then a rolling sound, like something heavy falling. Minutes later, the house was on fire. George and Jenny scrambled to get their children out. But 5 of them were trapped upstairs. Maurice, 14, Martha, 12, Louis, 9, Jenny, 8, and Betty, 5. The staircase was already engulfed in flames. George tried to break a window to climb inside, slicing his arm open in the process. He ran to get his ladder. It was missing. He ran to start his truck, to drive it up to the house and use it to climb inside. The engine wouldn't start. He tried a second truck. Dead. Meanwhile, Jenny screamed into the phone to call the fire department, but the line had been cut. The house burned for hours. By morning, it was nothing but ashes. And the 5 Sodder children? They were gone. The fire chief told the Sodders that their children had burned to ashes. But there was just one problem. There were no bones. In every house, fire remains are found. Teeth, skulls, something. But there was nothing. George took animal bones, burned them in a similar fire, and after hours, they remained intact. Yet the official story was that his children had burned completely. Something didn't add up. Then a witness came forward. A woman claimed she saw the 5 Sodder children in a car, watching the fire as it burned. A waitress in a nearby town swore she served breakfast to 5 children matching their descriptions, accompanied by 2 Italian men. George hired private investigators. One lead took them to a woman in St. Louis who said she had seen 4 of the children living in an orphanage. Then, in 1968, Jenny received a letter in the mail. There was no return address. Inside was a photograph of a young man and a message, "Louis Sodder, I love brother Frankie, Elil boys, a 90132 or 35. The Sodders stared at the photo. It looked exactly like Louis, now an adult. George and Jenny sent detectives to track the letter's origin. They were never seen again. The Sodders spent the rest of their lives searching for their children. George died in 1969. Jenny passed away in 1989. They never got answers. The case remains one of the most chilling unsolved mysteries in American history. And me? I still live in Fayetteville. Every Christmas Eve, I visit the spot where the Sodder house once stood. And sometimes, just sometimes, I see a man standing at the edge of the woods, watching, waiting. I tell myself it's nothing, but in my gut, I know the truth. The Sodder children never died in that fire. But I don't think they ever made it home. Story 9, The Possession of Annalise Michel. I still remember the way she looked at me that night, the darkness in her eyes, the way her lips twisted into a smile that wasn't her own. I had seen fear before, but nothing like this. This was something else, something ancient, something evil. It started in 1968. Annalise Michel was just 16 when the first signs appeared. She had been a normal girl, growing up in a devoutly Catholic family in Klingenberg, Germany. Her parents, Josef and Anna, were strict, but loving. They prayed together, went to church every Sunday, and never questioned their faith. But then Annalisa began seeing things that weren't there. Dark figures standing in corners, whispering her name. At night, she felt an unseen presence pressing down on her chest, making it impossible to breathe. She told her parents, but they dismissed it as bad dreams. Then came the seizures, violent convulsions that left her gasping for air, her body stiff and trembling. The doctors diagnosed her with temporal lobe epilepsy and prescribed medication. But the pills did nothing to stop the voices. By the time Annalise was 20, the darkness inside her had grown. She refused to enter churches, saying that she couldn't bear to be near the crucifix. She began speaking in strange languages, ones she had never studied: Latin, Aramaic, ancient tongues that only priests understood. At night she screamed in agony, her voice unnatural, guttural, inhuman. Her parents were desperate. The doctors had failed them. The medication had failed them. And so they turned to the church. Father Ernst Alt was the first to see her. The moment he stepped into their home, he knew this was not epilepsy. This was something far worse. He requested permission for an exorcism, and after months of deliberation, the church approved it. That's when Father Arnold Renz was brought in. He and Father Alt performed 67 exorcisms over 10 months, 67 sessions of pure horror. I was there for the recordings. I heard what came out of her mouth. At first, she would growl, snarl, and curse in voices that weren't her own. But soon they began speaking through her. I am Lucifer. I am Judas. I am Nero. I am Cain. I am Hitler. Each name sent chills through the room. These were the damned, the lost souls of history, claiming her as their own. She would convulse violently, her body bending in ways no human should move. She stopped eating. She dropped to 68 pounds, her face gaunt and hollow. Her eyes sank into dark pits, her skin pale as death. Then one night, she opened her mouth and let out a scream so unearthly that even the priests stepped back. Something inside her was fighting back. And then she spoke. "Mother, I'm afraid." For a brief moment, she was Annalisa again. Her mother rushed to her side, holding her frail body, whispering prayers. But it wasn't enough. The possession had drained her completely. On July 1st, 1976, Annalisa Michel died. The official cause was malnutrition and dehydration, but we knew better. The demons had won. The trial that followed was infamous. The priests and her parents were charged with negligent homicide. The recordings of the exorcisms were played in court, chilling everyone who heard them. The voices, the screams, the growls that could not have come from a human throat. The verdict, guilty. But her parents never regretted their decision. They believed they had done what was necessary, that Annalisa had died a martyr, saving her soul through suffering. Today, her grave is a pilgrimage site. People still visit, leaving rosaries, prayers, and notes. Some say they can hear her voice at night, whispering through the wind. Others claim to have seen her face in the shadows, watching, waiting. I try to forget, but sometimes, when I close my eyes, I hear that voice again. Not Annalisa's, the other one, and it whispers my name. Story 10, The Curse of Robert the Doll. I never believed in curses. Not until I met Robert. I was visiting Key West, Florida, with my girlfriend, Sarah. We had heard whispers about an eerie doll locked away in the Fort East Martello Museum. Robert the Doll. Supposedly, he had ruined lives, driven people insane, even caused death. We laughed it off, just another urban legend. But then we saw him. Robert sat in a glass case, a tattered sailor suit hanging off his small frame. His eyes, black and lifeless, seemed to follow us as we moved. His face was worn, cracked, but beneath the damage, there was something wrong about him, something almost alive. A museum guide approached us. "Be careful with Robert," she warned. "Always ask his permission before taking a picture. If you don't, well, bad things happen." I smirked and pulled out my phone, snapping a quick shot. Sarah elbowed me. "Don't be rude." I didn't ask Robert's permission. That night, the nightmares began. I was in a dark room. A child's laughter echoed around me, but I was alone. A shadow moved in the corner. Then I saw them, two black eyes, staring at me. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. The whisper came next, so close to my ear that I felt cold breath against my skin. "You didn't ask." I woke up gasping, drenched in sweat. Sarah stirred beside me. "What's wrong?" I didn't want to scare her, so I lied. "Nothing. Just a bad dream." But the bad luck started the next day. First, my phone crashed. The screen turned black. My picture of Robert gone. Then Sarah tripped on the museum steps, twisting her ankle. When we finally got back to our car, the engine refused to start. One thing after another, things kept going wrong. I tried to shake it off. Coincidence, I told myself. Nothing more. That night, I had another dream. This time, I wasn't alone in bed. I felt something small crawling up the mattress, its tiny hands pressing against the sheets. I turned my head slowly. Black eyes stared back at me. I screamed, jerking awake, my chest pounding. But the worst part? My blankets were pulled halfway down the bed. I knew then I had to apologize. The next morning, we rushed back to the museum. My hands trembled as I stood before Robert's glass case. His expression hadn't changed, but I could feel his presence. "I'm sorry," I whispered. I shouldn't have taken your picture without permission. I placed a letter in the box beneath him, like so many others had done before me. Letters from people begging for forgiveness. As we left, the air felt lighter. The tension that had clung to me for days lifted. Since then, I've never doubted Robert's curse. Some say it's just a doll, just wood, fabric, and paint. But I know the truth. Robert is watching, and if you don't respect him, he never forgets. End.